Welcome back to another episode of STEM and Stilettos. This is your host, Zofia Morales, and today we have an amazing guest who's been an intrapreneur. And if you're not familiar with that term, you're about to become familiar with that term. And today we are discussing the Intrapreneur's Edge, how to innovate, influence, and ignite change from within. Our guest today is Nancy Bistritz-Balkan, a senior communications and marketing executive with a passion for transforming complex business challenges into compelling and strategic narratives that drive change, build trust, and inspire action. An award-winning storyteller and change agent, she's known for translating complexity into clarity and leading high-impact programs across crisis management, communications, B2B marketing, internal engagement, and executive visibility. With deep experience in regulated industries like healthcare, financial services, and technology, Nancy has held senior roles at Equifax, McKesson, and CHEP, which provides those blue pallets that you'll see at Costco and some other large retailers. She began her career as a journalist and has since built integrated communication functions from the ground up, earning a reputation as a high EQ leader who builds strong teams and trusted enterprise partnerships. Her superpower, navigating ambiguity with clarity and purpose. Welcome to the show, Nancy. I'm so happy to have you here with me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Excellent. So you have had one heck of a career. And being a diplomatic woman, I'm not going to mention how many years or decades might be involved with this. But
there's a few.
You've taken this sort of entrepreneurial role as a significant component of your career. Talk to us a little bit about what an intrapreneur is as opposed to an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And as you and I started talking about what that meant and what that means, I started thinking about that and reflecting about what that meant to me in terms of my career and actually where that got started for me. And I think the whole concept for me is really about taking something and building it from the ground up within an established organization. So where an entrepreneur, so somebody who's basically starting something on their own, outside with their own resources, outside of an organization, outside of a company, outside of an institution, they're bootstrapping it, they're having their own budget, they're creating something from scratch.
They're beating the bushes for investment.
Exactly. This is something where there's already something that's established. There's already a framework. There may already be a staff. There may already be resources and budget. And you're going in there and basically sort of carving out something that's new. And I started basically doing that. For me, I started doing that when I was in college. And when you and I chatted about me coming on, I started thinking about this and I looked back at my career and I thought, I've definitely done this over the course of my professional career. But then I started thinking about it and I actually went back and thought, the first time I ever did this was in college. And if you don't mind me telling
tell the story. What was the first one?
So the first time was really, I was a journalism student. I fell into journalism, luckily. And it was probably the end of my sophomore year. And I had great journalism professors. And the dean of the journalism school said, you really, really have to be on the staff at the school paper. And it was Auburn University. I went to Auburn University. And he said, you really have to be a staff member. It's great that you're writing. It's great that you're doing all the writing, but you really need to be a paid staff member. That's how you're going to get an internship. That's how you're going to get a job. And so I went to the paper and the paper said, we don't have any open roles. And this was, I won't say far back, but this was back far enough that when papers were being created, it was all done manually.
Yeah,
Whereas
and that was actual paper.
it was actual paper. People were designing things all manually. It was not desktop publishing. They weren't using computers to do it. And so I went to the paper and they said the only role that maybe we were thinking about is we were kind of thinking that maybe we might create or you could help create this technical editor. We would not have a staff, it would only be one person, and we really would need you to help create this role of technical editor. And I was thinking to myself, I haven't taken any technical courses. And they said to me, you would need to learn Quark Express, which is a desktop publishing course and, software. And you would need to learn how to use a Mac computer, which no one was using for newspapers. So I said, well, if it's a paid position with the newspaper, I'll take it. And so I did. I knew nothing about how to use desktop software publishing. So I just took the job. I knew nothing about this. And before you knew it, I mean, I literally, the screens were this big. So
Yeah, about 6 or 7 inches
yeah,
across, isn't
yeah,
not much bigger than your phone.
right. So to design the front page of a newspaper on something this big. And so I basically had to come in, I had to learn the software, I had to learn how to use the computer. And then not only did I have to do that, but then I was responsible for all the change management within the newspaper to teach the editors how to do all this.
Right.
And then I not only did that, but I also went back to Auburn University and said, hey, I think you should start a lab course to teach graduating seniors how to do this because I think this is what's going to be
This is
taking.
a trend. Yes.
Yes, this is a trend. So my final quarter at Auburn University, I taught a lab course on desktop publishing and how to do this. And so I think that was the first time I had ever done something like that. And I think that's really where that sort of intrapreneur sort of mindset started. And that's where I picked up that there was already obviously a student newspaper, there was already an institution, there was already a staff, there was already a budget, and there was already a need. And so it sort of checked all those boxes for an intrapreneur. I just saw, okay, I just said, I have the whole mindset to go in there and just basically create something and created a position and basically filled an ask. But I
Yeah.
had the right mindset of just, okay, well, there's nothing here. I can't, it's not like I could fail.
You're not going to break anything.
Right. I wasn't going to break anything, is exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I find really cool about intrapreneurship. And
Right.
there's more of that out there, I think, than people realize. And a lot of folks who have this, I want to create something and kind of be my own boss
Correct.
spirit that comes with being an entrepreneur,
Yes.
oftentimes think that they have to leave larger organizations in order to fill that drive.
Right.
And depending on your organization, that might be the truth, but there are other larger organizations out there who are looking for somebody with exactly that drive and spirit. And
Right.
so if you have that entrepreneurial mindset, but you hate beating the bushes for money and some of the other stuff that goes along with that, you
Right.
might want to shift your mindset more to looking for something that's a little more intrapreneurial. I know when I was doing it, because that was one of the commonalities we shared,
Right. Right.
they called it skunk works where I was
Right.
at. We need
Right.
somebody who can skunk work this thing. And so I would get thrown into like operations that weren't working or new operations that needed to be established. And they're like, just go make this thing happen. And
Correct.
I was given people, I was given budget and all that kind of stuff, and a great deal of free reign
Right.
to go out there and make it happen. And a regular paycheck.
Right. Yes.
Which
Exactly.
is a hard thing for many entrepreneurs because the
Correct.
regular paycheck tends to evaporate, which is why
Yeah.
maybe intrapreneurship might be a path.
There you go. Exactly. That's the other benefit. That's the other benefit.
Exactly. So let's talk about you've worked with a number of quote unquote large established
Right.
organizations on the Fortune very few numbers list, right?
Yes.
Tell us about the first one of those that you were actually an entrepreneur at.
I would probably say the first one that I was a true, what I would say, entrepreneur. I mean, there have been several. I think the first one that I was a true entrepreneur at would probably be Equifax. The sort of path I took at Equifax was such an interesting one, and I was afforded so many opportunities there. Most people do not know this. Equifax has several business units within
Yeah.
it, and I joined the company in 2014. I joined the company within its consumer division, which at the time was the smallest of the business units. And I joined again, new role for the consumer division, and I joined as the director of content strategy. Because of my background, I was supporting the company in a new acquisition it had done. So I was working on brand architecture, I was working on messaging, all great things. I did that for about a year. After about a year, there was an opening for PR and internal comms, which my background is also in PR and internal comms, and gathered those two things under my wings. And so I was overseeing content, PR, and internal comms. And so I had this sort of new kind of role. I had very limited resources at that time, but I had a great, very supportive manager at that time. She was head of marketing, and I had a great team of marketing overseeing what I was doing, who very much had confidence in what I could do. And Equifax, though, the other key to, I think, being an entrepreneur is very much networking.
Mhm.
I think that's the other thing I learned along the way is relationship building and things like that. That's the other thing I also learned at Auburn University was networking and building relationships. So at Equifax, even though I was part of the consumer division, I did have a lot of relationships across the organization with the corporate communications
Yeah.
team, et cetera, et cetera. And I did have to work with corporate communications. And so what I found very quickly was that I was getting a lot of media inquiries asking me for, hey, I'm a reporter with the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, and I'd like to do a media interview about credit reports or credit
Right.
scores. And this was not something that Equifax was doing, which I
Hmm.
found very strange.
Yeah, exactly. They
Equifax,
are one of
yeah,
the places you would
right.
expect to go for
And
this.
you would think, but Equifax at the time was just not, they were just not doing those kinds of interviews at the time. At the time, the company was doing different kinds of media interviews and reacting just to what I would consider consumer credit education stories with the media was just not on their radar screen. It was not a priority for them to be doing at the time. However, I saw it as something the company should be doing as a responsible, hey, let's do this. It should be something from a cadence. I also noticed that the company's competitors at the time, Experian and TransUnion, Experian in particular, had a consumer education program. They had a dedicated person doing this, and I thought we should be doing this.
Yes.
So I started having conversations with the head of corporate communications at Equifax and the legal team, and I said, I really think that we should be doing this. I'd really like to start doing this. And it was really not like they just greenlit it and said, go ahead, good luck. There were a lot of tough conversations. It
I'm
was just
sure.
like, why do you want to do this? What value do you think this could have? I mean, it was pretty tough, primarily, and also because at the time, Equifax and obviously a lot of the other financial institutions were heavily regulated by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Sure, absolutely.
So we were had to work in heavy partnership with legal and the compliance team at Equifax.
Right.
So I said, listen, just allow me to work very, very closely with legal, with compliance. We had an entire team of people, and I said, let me just test run this. Let me just see what I can do. And I just sort of said, allow me to slow roll this. And I really just wanted to see what I could do with it. I didn't want to run it out of the gate, but I just said, let me just try this and slowly see what I can do. And over time, we started to be very, very successful with the things that we were doing. We started very slowly. And I first did just, interviews over email. So I took reporters' questions over email, and I worked with legal and compliance to get, just interviews
The
answered.
proper answers that
Yeah.
aren't going to get us in trouble. Yes.
And over time, I think what legal and compliance and the company saw were, hey, look, we really were going to do this in the right way. I also found that Equifax surprisingly didn't have one person who was this overarching consumer credit expert. We had an expert in bankruptcy and somebody who knew all about credit reports and someone who knew all about credit scores. But we didn't have one person who knew all about consumer credit.
Right.
And so I sort of started to learn different parts of the business, and which was great. It was very educational for me. And so over the span of, I would say from 2015 to about 2017-ish, I learned a lot. I worked with a ton of people. We did a lot of interviews, which was fantastic from a results and placement. And then 2017 happened. And I would say during this time, I kept sort of really championing with my head of marketing at the time. I really want to start this consumer education program. I really felt passionate about it. I met the head of consumer education at Experian. I had a chance to network with him and speak to him. And I was working with the head of corporate social responsibility at Equifax. So I was putting all of the pieces to this consumer education program together, and I really wanted to push it forward, but the timing just never seemed to feel right. And then the incident at Equifax happened, and all of a sudden I was pushed forward because I had become this de facto expert on consumer credit. And I wound up being in this responsive, reactive role because of my expertise, which it wound up being
Well, let's remind people what happened. What
yeah,
was the
yeah.
inciting incident?
There was a very, very public cybersecurity incident in 2017 where there was a data breach, a very public data breach of several million credit reports that impacted millions of people's credit reports
Right.
at Equifax. And it was very public. And we were at I would say, what's very commonplace now in the marketplace where data breaches happen all the time. And it's sort of a non-issue. But in 2017,
Well, I wouldn't say a non-issue, but it's a more routine,
right.
what do I want to say, risk event
Right.
that happens.
Right.
Yes.
You're right. And so I think what happened then, it was certainly very public. And I think there
And
were
very shocking in that
yes,
moment.
it was very, very shocking. And there were so many things about it from a PR perspective, from a crisis perspective. I think there were so many things that happened that certainly put consumer education, certainly put that in a different spotlight. But it wound up in a very strange way. The consumer education program, which I had been talking about for almost 2 years, while it temporarily put that on pause, what wound up happening is you had the incident that happened. And then I would say in early 2018, there was a shift from, okay, we had the crisis that happened, and then leadership came and said, hey, we really do want to put together a consumer education program at Equifax. We don't know how to do that. We need someone to put together a consumer education program. And they came to my boss, and she came to me and she said,
You've got a green light.
Yeah. And so I was able to kind of, because I already had the nuts and the bolts and the pieces of the puzzle all put together, I had everything in my back pocket. So I very quickly, and again, I created this brand new role, something that had never been put together before. I created this brand new role of head of communications and consumer education at Equifax. And I was really, really proud of it because it was something that the company had never, it was just not something that was, I think, a focus for them.
Until it needed to be.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it was
Exactly.
really important to me. And it was something I felt very passionate about. I felt like, hey, putting this all together and having the whole company really feel like it's a focus. And I think timing is very important. Having people all feel like, okay, the timing is right for this. It's all got to be a focus now. And not only that, but in order to put this program together, it required, because I had worked with people across the company. I mean, the company had and has a presence all over the world. So I had to get input from stakeholders in different regions, in different parts of the world. So I had to call on people that I had been working with across time
Yeah,
zones.
you had already kind of built that network to start
I had
with.
already built the
I
network.
love that. I
So
love
I
that.
do think the network was important.
I would agree with the network being super important. If you're
Yes.
looking to entrepreneur, I know on my own journey, people don't look at you and go, well, you seem like you would be the one, unless you've been out there like actually doing the thing. You were already out there doing the thing. I was in
Right.
my own way also already out there doing the thing, in that I looked around me and went, okay, I don't like how this is happening. It's
Yeah.
problematic.
Right.
And I have an idea for how to deal with this. So I would gather the information. I would talk to the person whose level it corresponded to and
Right.
say,
Right.
here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm seeing we're losing. Here's how I think we could reform this. I know there have been historical challenges to this. This is how I would address those. And I would present that whole business case.
Right.
And more often than not, with differing degrees of pushback, I would eventually get a green light on it.
Yeah.
And I think if you're showing that kind of initiative, you get offered these roles. But if you're sitting there going, oh God, I wish I could have some autonomy over what's going on, and you haven't taken any action to gain autonomy
Right. Right.
or authority over it, that I think is the critical piece, that initiative to become in a position to do something about it.
Yeah, and you raise a really good point about identifying pain points
Mm-hmm.
because that is, I think there's two things it's really important about, especially within existing organizations. The two things I would say are identifying the pain points and managerial courage
Yeah.
to identify things that may have just been status quo. I do know, and not to pick on Equifax because I truly loved working there. It was just such a wonderful organization and I learned so much and I had the legal partnership. I cannot emphasize that enough and that's probably more for us to discuss there, but the pain points and the managerial courage, specifically one thing there, I do remember there being one specific thread line sort of topic that was always,
Sure.
hey, we can't talk about that in the press. That was not a good topic for Equifax to talk about in the press, was around credit scores and improving credit scores. That was a challenge.
Okay.
Specifically from the CFPB, that was something that was really, it was just,
The
that was difficult.
CFPB.
Yeah,
So what?
Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it was tricky. It was very tricky for us to advise consumers how to improve their credit scores from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which I can get.
There's kind of a conflict of interest in some
Correct.
way. You're the
Correct.
one holding the
Right.
keys to the kingdom.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I had come up with this storyline and I said, I really wanted to do this story about credit scores over the decades. So if you think about credit scores in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s and your 50s and your 60s, and all magazines and media do stories like that. And it had never been done before. And legal was like, no, we can't do that. There's no way we can do that. And I said, well, what if I worked with our data and analytics team and I got, we worked and did this the right way. And we worked with a journalist and we worked and we were very methodical about this. And we actually did this the right way. And long story short, I had to do a business case on this. And very long story short, it took us probably a year to do this. We got a journalist to agree to work through the process. We did work with the data and analytics team, and we actually got this story published that showed credit scores in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s and your 50s. And it wound up being this great piece. Like, if you were in your 20s and the persona of someone in their 20s and their credit behavior in their 20s.
What they can be looking at. And
student loans and things like that. And it wound up being this great piece and I think a great piece for Equifax to say, hey, look, we actually worked with a journalist on this piece.
And we're looking out for the consumer. And
it wound up being a great piece for them. And I remember right before the incident in 2017, going on we had to do an educational trip. And I was with one of my legal partners. And he said, if you had told me 3 years ago, Nancy, that I would have worked as much with you and done all of the media that we would have done and all the credit education, I never would have believed it. And he's like, but it's just been such a great thing. And to hear that from someone on the legal team and to know that we built that kind of effort from scratch, it was it was really, really worth it.
And I love the way you were able to give them courage, because I found that you need to prepare the ground for the objections, because there will be legitimate business-based objections to why they don't want to go do this. And I found the more data I could give them
100%.
About the unseen losses that they're having right now, unacknowledged ways in which they're gigging themselves, and bring them that data and challenge some of the preconceptions that are behind that knee-jerk, oh no, we can't do that.
100%.
The more likely I was to get someone who was going to sign off on that and say, okay, take that forward.
100%.
Especially the stuff that had been tried in the past and failed.
Yes. Yeah.
I found that was some of the richest ground in which to go digging. Was when I brought it up to somebody and they said, oh, we've tried that, but it didn't work. Oh, well, tell me more about that.
Yes.
What caused it to fail? What were the weak points? Were there people standing in the way? What was the reason? And the more of that kind of information I could ferret out, the more likely I was to be able to address it and get it over the goal line.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we are up on our second break. I know. I'm going to find some place in there to put the first break. And so I think where I want to go when we come back from our break is, what is the most misunderstood part of being an intrapreneur?
Got it.
And so hang with us to get the answer to that question, and we'll be right back.
Oh, shake it loud, the world here. Tech is ours and we show no fear. No fear. No fear. No fear.
Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales. I am back with the amazing and wonderful Nancy Bistritz. And so, Nancy, tell us, what is the most entrepreneur? No. What is the most misunderstood part of being entrepreneur, either by the leaders you've worked with, your peers, or even yourself early on in your career?
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's the most, but I think one of the challenges that I've run into, I would say fairly consistently, is a little bit of turf war. That's been fairly, I would say that's fairly consistent.
I would second that
Yeah.
there are fiefdoms
Yes.
that exist
Yes.
in these companies, and you have to
Yes.
learn how to become that diplomat.
Yeah. I think that is, you have said it so well right there. I've gone through varying degrees of that fiefdom. Everything from don't talk to people on my team without my
Mhm.
consent, which I would say what I would consider to be the most damaging.
That's one of the most challenging ones
Yeah.
to
I
overcome.
think
Yes.
that's just, I don't, to me, that's not helpful.
Well, and it's not healthy, and it's
Yeah.
a sign of a lack of
Yeah.
managerial courage, in my
Right.
opinion.
Right. And, you know, so I've gone from that to, I think that, and then I think for me, that's the most difficult part. And then I typically have gone, the other part of that is situations where I've gone into where corporate is not aware that I even exist. That's the other
Yeah.
part of the problem. And you're like, well, wait, I've been hired. And you have to explain, I'm here and this is my role. And you have to continuously invite yourself and reinvite yourself and reinvite yourself.
Yes.
And so there's always this kind of knocking on the door and inviting yourself to the party.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a lot where your network comes in,
Yes.
right?
And I have no
Getting
shame.
to know people in the other
Yes.
fiefdoms, if you
Yes.
will, and gaining that working relationship. I'm not a smoker, but I spent much of my early career on the smoker's deck.
Yeah.
Because it was one of the places where all the fiefdoms came together and all the
Yes.
heads of the fiefdoms came together.
Yes.
And so it gave me a chance to get to know the people who are in influence in these other fiefdoms, and it'd make my job as an entrepreneur so much easier.
I think you just, again, you nailed it. Wherever you can find spheres of influence, or
Especially the casual gathering of the
Yes.
influential.
Yes.
Yes.
Wherever you can find pockets of networks that work in your favor. And I think I have been, over the course of my career, I have been, and this dates back to when I was at Auburn University. I remember, and this is a funny story. I look back on it to this day, laugh about it, because I remember being a student and I would take time, and at least 3-4 times a week, I would just go and network with all of my journalism professors. Even the ones I didn't have classes with, I would just go and sit with them and listen to their stories. And I remember at the end of the year, my junior year, there was a big banquet, and I remember they were giving away a scholarship to the student who was the most dedicated to journalism. And they were talking about this wonderful student who networked and who created relationships. And they would always come in and meet with the professors, even when they didn't have to. And I was there with the person I was seeing at the time. And I leaned over and I was like,
Who is this
who
person?
is this person?
Someone tell me who this person
Like,
is.
who is this crazy person who's doing this? And they call my name and I'm like,
Yeah, flabbergasted.
I was flabbergasted, because I just thought, well, I was just creating relations. That's all I was doing, was just listening to these people. But I think, to your point, it's just about creating pockets of influence. And I did that, I would say, every career I've ever had, whether it was at New Run, where I had to call people I didn't even know in Paris and in Italy, where I didn't even know the native language in Italy, but I just knew that I could not do my job in a silo. And
Yes.
I knew, as a team of one, which often, that's another thing, in the roles, I've often been a team of one. So I think that's another, I think sometimes as an intrapreneur, I've been perceived as, oh, she likes to work alone. No, I don't love to work alone, but often when it's a net new
That's
role,
where you start. Yeah.
that's where you start. And I think you talked about you've been in roles where you've been given funding and you've been given resources. I think that's fantastic. But
And I've
sometimes,
been in other roles where it
yeah,
was completely dotted line. It's
yeah,
like, you need to go do this.
yeah,
And so I would have to build dotted line
yeah,
relationships with people in other departments and
right,
convince them to
right,
come to my meeting or
right,
do this little thing for me or whatever it
right.
is.
And they're like,
Yeah.
who are you? What are you doing? And
Yeah, I've got zero authority over you, but I need you to
right,
get my job done. So
right,
let's
exactly,
let's figure out how to exercise this influence.
exactly.
And I also learned how to borrow influence,
Oh, I
you
think
know,
that's a great point. I
and
think that's
you
a
don't,
great point.
yeah, you don't always have to have positional influence. You can borrow positional influence.
I love that. I
Yeah.
absolutely love what you just said. I think that's a very good point, especially when you're involved in a situation where there's a perception that you're going to come in and you're going to take something. And
Mm,
I do think, and I'll use McKesson for example. McKesson, when I came into the McKesson situation, I was creating the cybersecurity communications role. And McKesson was such a unique environment because McKesson was great culture, great CEO, great environment. But the company itself had just gone through the opioid crisis.
yes.
And so it was coming out of this like very, and cybersecurity, it was like, okay, cybersecurity, you're on deck next with the focus, right? If
Yeah, because we
you're
don't need
risk,
any more black eyes in the
right.
media.
No more. We don't need any more risk. We don't need any more problems. And so I think the culture from a cybersecurity perspective, there was a lot of attention paid on cybersecurity. I was perceived from corporate communications, I was a shadow organization. I don't know that everyone in corporate communications knew I was a hire. So there was a little bit of like, what is she doing over there? Is she
Is it
going
all
to
right
wreck
to talk to
everything?
her? Yeah.
Yeah. Is she going to wreck everything that corporate communications is doing? And so a lot of partnership, a lot of, hey, to your point, borrowing influence, a lot of how can we work together? And I think just ensuring that there was partnership along the way and constant how can we work together. I think there
Yeah.
was always that on my part. And also I think as an entrepreneur, sometimes there's the perception that, oh, she can come in and she loves ambiguity. And I think to a
Oh,
certain
chaos.
degree,
Yes, she eats
yeah,
up chaos. No, I hate
yeah,
chaos. That's why
yes,
I get rid of it.
yeah. And I think to a certain degree, I can come in with a blank piece of paper and create, yes, a strategy and a 3-year plan with tactics and objectives and goals and metrics. And are we in line with things? But to your point, there's a difference between ambiguity and chaos and role clarity.
Yes.
I think if you're gunning to be an entrepreneur, make sure you understand and can differentiate between the two.
Yeah, exactly. So we are getting down to the end of our interview here. What would be your advice to someone who maybe is feeling this spark of entrepreneur kind of spirit and isn't sure how to start? And they feel like maybe entrepreneurship might be more the thing.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them about when you're in an organization pushing the boundaries without like burning bridges and creating enemies?
Yeah. Somebody once said, I think it was, what was it? Glenn Ross,
Yes.
ABC,
Yeah, always be
always be
closing.
closing. I say, always be curious. Think, always be curious. Ask why something is done the way it's done, and always have empathy for the stakeholder. I always
Yeah.
look at the stakeholder, whether it's the customer, the client, the employee, could it be done a different way? Could it be done a better way? And I think right now, AI is like the CEO's darling, but it cannot do everything. And if people had curiosity and empathy, can often be a great pathway into that world of entrepreneurship and
Absolutely.
creating something.
Absolutely. Well, and one thing I want to say about AI, I discovered this statistic the other day. The IQ of AI is only around 110 to 130.
Yeah.
Which means I'm smarter than AI still. And a great many of my listeners are also going to be much smarter than AI as well. So
That they are.
first thing, don't be intimidated or think that AI is going to be able to take your job away, because it does not have the curiosity, it does not have the inspiration a lot of times to see what needs to be seen, to do what needs to be done, to follow an entrepreneurship sort of path like this. Also, don't run away from it, because it's a really good brainstorming partner.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It is.
But absolutely, don't think it's going to take your job, because a really good manager is, and especially one who's entrepreneurial, very hard to find, very hard to replace.
Right. Exactly.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today, Nancy.
This
has
been
you
so much for
amazing
having
conversation. And thank you to all you in listener world who've come and invested your time with us today. We appreciate you spending your time here and investing in your own self, your own way of thinking and looking at things. And I would love to hear from you. Drop me a quick line, Zofia at STEMinstilettos.com. That's Zofia at STEMinstilettos.com. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, if there are guests I should have on, topics you want to see me take on. And until next week, go out, be beautiful, be bold, and be yourself.